huge thank you for joining us today for a discussion on your guide to getting started with Passkeys. This is a lead dev webinar created in partnership with FusionAuth. Thank you so much, FusionAuth, for your partnership and support. This webinar will last roughly 45 minutes, after which both myself and our panelists will head over to the Lead Dev Slack channel to answer some of your questions in a webinar Q&A channel. So please join us there after the session. We may also have some time at the end of the session to answer a few questions. So please think about your questions throughout the session, and we will hold time at the end to have some conversation here. If we don't get to every question, please do join us on Slack. So let's get started today with some introductions. My name is Adrienne, and I will be joined by our amazing panelists, Aisha, Rue, and Brian. And they're going to be sharing their experiences and insights. I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. So let's start with Aisha.
Hi everyone, my name is Aisha. I am based in London, United Kingdom. At the moment, I am a senior security specialist solution architect at AWS. Prior to that, I had worked as security engineer and led security engineering teams in the past in platform security, and DevSecOps. Lovely to be here.
Thank you, Aisha.
Hi everyone, my name's Rue. I work for a company called Dashlane, where I've been for the last 13 years. I started as an iOS developer. I was doing software engineering for a big bunch of time, and then I moved into management, managing several teams. And in the last 3 years, I took on this role of product innovation. And I've spent a lot of time in the FIDO Alliance, learning about Passkeys, pushing our teams to implement passkey management, and move into the passwordless world. I'm a Brit, but I'm actually based in France for the last 18 years. I'll pass it over to Brian.
Thanks. Brian Pontarelli. I'm the founder and former CEO of FusionAuth. I moved over into the CTO spot. Started FusionAuth about 8 years ago at this point. Two of us started coding from zero and built the whole product up. Bootstrapped the whole business, and then sold it to a private equity firm a few years ago. I still continue to help out and advise and help with product and engineering. And then my background is just in just software engineering. I've been coding for about 27 years now, and have worked at a variety of companies, including like Orbitz and BEA before they were bought by Oracle, and just done various things over the course of the years. But yeah, happy to be here and happy to talk about Passkeys. Should be awesome. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. And so, FusionAuth, the company, is based out of Westminster, Colorado, but we also have offices in Washington, and I believe we're going to be opening one in California as well. So yeah,
Awesome.
Great to be here.
Thank you all so much for the introductions. I'm so excited to be here with you today. We really have such a wealth of experience on this topic that is still quite new to a lot of people and can be considered challenging even to very senior technologists. So we're really lucky to have y'all here. I think we're going to learn a lot today. I think we're going to give people confidence. And as with all lead dev sessions, we really want anyone joining us today or watching later to get practical, actionable advice from this session. We plan to tell you our stories from our real experience, from our hard-won experience. And so just really excited to be in conversation today. So I want to get started at the beginning, kind of at the fundamentals. Passkeys can be considered confusing, even to experienced technologists, due to the different ways that different companies implement them quite differently. So how do you clearly define what constitutes a passkey? And given a definition, how do you clearly pitch the most practical benefits of passkeys? So Brian, could you please kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take that one. So what's a passkey, right? So passkey is essentially just a way to prove your identity, right? And you can do this without passwords. It can be device bound, which basically means it's like attached to a device and sort of locked there. It can be device attached, which means it like comes from somewhere else and gets sort of attached to a device. But once you're on a computer, a mobile device, whatever it is, the website basically says like, hey, I want to know who you are. You open up your passkey and you basically, there's this little negotiation and an exchange, and you pass some identity information over, and the website or application says, yep, that's you. And now you can go in, right? So it's a way to prove identity without the traditional username and password. It's built on a 50-year-old technology, right? So like we've had asymmetric encryption for about 50 years, sort of kind of based on that. And so it's, it's been tested for a very long time. But it reduces that friction, right? It allows users to get into systems, get into applications very quick and easily. And so that's really the big pitch. It's like, it's safer, it's simpler, like just use it. And Rue, do you have anything to add to that from sort of the, the management perspective?
Yeah, coming from password management, when I think about passwords and the flaws that they have and how passkeys address them, I think of three things. So not everyone in the world uses a password manager. A lot of people are dealing with passwords in their head, and they're coming up with typically weak or reused or easily guessable passwords. So that's, I think, the first problem. Passwords don't need a lot of effort to crack, where passkeys are always unique and strong. The second thing is, the biggest attacks that happen online today are phishing attacks. And with AI and large language models, these phishing attacks are getting way more sophisticated. I was talking to some folks in Japan working for companies like NTT Docomo, and how Japan hadn't really faced like wide phishing attacks because the language was a barrier, and same with countries like Iceland. But now phishing is taking off in these sort of niche countries where language was a barrier in the past. So passkeys solve that because they're origin bound. So when you create a passkey for, let's say, PayPal, it's bound to paypal.com. You can't use that on a phishing site. So that's the major phishing resistant element to it. And the third thing is, there's nothing to steal if you hack into the server. Today, RPs may store passwords in plain text, worst case scenario. They may hash them badly, or even if they are hashed, there's some sort of signal as to what that password could be. Where passkeys only store a public key. And as you mentioned, Brian, this is public-private cryptography. The public key is free for all. Anyone can look at it, anyone can read it. There's nothing to gain from having the public key. However, the private key has to be stored very securely on the authenticator, and that doesn't leave the user's device. That's the sort of public-private key authentication part that's so magical, let's say, and that's tried and tested. But it's the whole package. It's an API, it's origin binding, and every passkey you create is always unique and strong. So those are the things that I kind of try and get over to at least technologists who come to passkeys and try and contrast them with passwords.
I love that. That is a really good segue into my next question. I wanted to hear a bit from Aisha. So how are passkeys similar to those authentication methods users like you and I have used before? And can you speak about how you make a distinction? And I love analogies. So if you have any analogies in your tool belt that you use to kind of explain the difference, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Adrian. So earlier, Brian and Rue already alluded into some of the differences and similarities with, traditional authentication systems with passwords and asymmetric encryption with passkeys. So there are some differences that we've already discussed. Essentially, similarities wise, they're not really an alien concept to a lot of users. So if we look at the use of passkeys, we are Face ID, Touch ID, Windows Hello, device pin, authenticator, etc. So in the way it is applied is quite familiar. You unlock your device and you're in. In terms of differences, the big change is obviously what's happening under the hood. So how I would explain the difference is that with the traditional authentication, is something it's something the users know in authentication word that we rely on. And Drew talked about some of the pitfalls that it comes with having, being vulnerable to attacks, etc., which we can perhaps dive into a little bit more detail in later on. With Passkeys, it is something you have and something you are with biometrics as well, right? So these are the essential differences, and it helps with, the secret can be stolen, phished, or reused, but private key doesn't really leave your device. An analogy I can use is like a digital car key that you would, with passwords, every time you want to, for example, drive, you have to type the license plate plus another secret, etc. It's clunky, it's not very secure. Whoever can see the number, the license plate number, can copy it. But with a passkey, it's just your car just recognizes the key fob instantly, and it's effortless for you. Unless they have the fob, it's impossible to just copy the plate and then drive away because there is no secret in place. Yeah, so we could dive into the threats. The threat changes in situations like this, but it moves away from attacks like phishing, for example.
That is an excellent analogy. I really like that car key analogy. Rue and Brian, do you have anything you wanted to add before we move forward? Other ways you've kind of used plain language to explain?
I would say if we're talking to technologists, if they're familiar with like SSH keys, there's very similar things going on in the background. So if they feel comfortable, secure using their SSH key, they should feel comfortable and secure using a passkey. Yeah.
Yeah, similar to like mutual TLS, right? So it's like if you have a key pair that you can exchange with somebody else and they can exchange one back with you, it's kind of that mechanism, right? So when you get down, like you're talking to a technologist, that's the way you say it. When you're talking to sort of an end user, we like to say it's like, it's the simplest way to prove who you are without having to memorize anything, right? It's just like, all you're doing is like your device tells the application it's you. And you've already logged into your rights. You've already touch ID'd or face ID'd into that device. And then those things become unlocked. And now you can prove you're you. And so that's just kind of the simplest end user explanation that we use.
I'm absolutely delighted with the way y'all answered that question. I've been doing these events for Lead Dev for a decade, and I think this is the first time a group of panelists has taken the personas and really pieced each one out super clearly without my having to prompt. So I am delighted. We are truly led by experts today here, folks. I'm so thrilled. So Brian, let's get to the nitty-gritty. This is the question everyone asks, right? What does recovery look like if passkeys are?
Yeah, so it's kind of vendor dependent or implementation dependent, I'll say. So I'll kind of speak to the way that FusionAuth does it, right? Because we use passkeys as sort of like an added sense of security and then an added option to just reduce that friction. But it doesn't take away the ability to still identify a user in an older method, right? And that's either via password or via some sort of like identity verification. Like I'll send you a link and you click on the link and then I know you have access to the email or your phone number, SMS. And so that's how we do it, right? So we say, okay, would you like to authenticate easier, end user? And they're like, yeah, I totally want to do that. So they click a button and then the passkey negotiation and creation happens. Then they come back and they're on maybe another device and they don't have their passkey, right? And so we basically say like, hey, it looks like your account has a passkey, but it's not connected to like, we can't find it on this device, right? Because there's this reauth system that basically does that negotiation. And it's like, then we just have a link and it's really like sign in with a password or like sign in using another method. And then it's based on policy, what methods are allowed. And we allow a number of different methods, including password or, one-time link or, one-time password OTP. So anyway, that's the way we do it. So we fall back just because we understand that it's very plausible that the user no longer has access to that passkey and we fall back. But, that's outside of sort of like the password management system. And so Rue can probably talk to that, like what happens in those cases.
Yeah, definitely. But while you were talking, I was thinking of some of the things that I'd love to say. It really depends on what you're protecting. Passkeys are an authentication method. You could be signing into some throwaway social network site or banking or, some sort of financial or Bitcoin service, whatever. Like all of these things are not the same, and the level of assurance that you need is going to vary. So, some services might be fine with sending you an email recovery link, and that's fine. You click that link, you re-enroll your passkey, you're back in the game. Um, what I do see happening in the future, and as Aisha and someone we were talking to previously are based in sort of UK and Europe, and it's happening in the US, digital credentials are coming along, digital identity is coming along, and that may change the way recovery happens, where you enroll your state driving license, your passport as a recovery method for particular services, not all, obviously. And then that's your fallback, because you can always get reissued an identity from your state, and that could help you then prove who you are in order to re-enroll a passkey, which you'll use for day-to-day authentication. So that I see as something coming in the next few years. But for now, I imagine any flow that's used by a service for passwords, because people forget their passwords, will probably be reused for passkeys. Most likely a magic link, maybe an SMS OTP. But it really depends on what is that passkey protecting, what is that service, like what's the value of your account if that service was taken away from, an account takeover.
That's a great point.
Yeah, that is a really good point. Brian, was there something else you wanted Rue to speak on?
Sorry, I kind of jumped into my answer, but I think you were referring to password management. Yeah, I can quickly touch on that. So, password management is difficult because you have zero knowledge. You're encrypting a vault, and you have to be able to actually lose access to that vault for there to be security. It sounds strange to say it, but if you cannot totally lose access to something, then there's no security, because anyone can regain access to it. So what we do, and I think some other competitors do, is allow the user to generate something like an account recovery key, which is like a long string of characters, which they can print out, they can write down. Recovery is difficult. And I think what we're going to start seeing, once people like lock the authentication front door, is attackers are going to look at other avenues such as recovery. So recovery needs to have some focus in the next few years, I'd say.
Absolutely agree. Thank you for lifting that up. So kind of to this point, Rue, tell us why people are reluctant to make the switch to passkeys. And, as with our earlier question, I'd love to hear the difference in your thoughts on the kind of persona level, from end user to technologist. There's reluctance at every level. So I would love for you to start, Rue, but Aisha, Brian, pick it up, because the people who are here today are here for a reason, and I think every one of us has encountered that reluctance. So if we are proponents of passkeys, we're interested in passkeys, we want to use passkeys, like how can we anticipate that reluctance? So
Yeah,
kick us off.
it's a great question. I think, it's something that comes up often. I'd start with, you can't see a passkey, you can't look at it. There's a kind of comfort in being able to reveal the password and go, oh, there it is, that's my password. It's all, complex and long, but it's there, and I can copy it and paste it and share it with my friends. You can't do that easily with passkeys. So there's this fear of unknown, fear of like, what is it? Where is it? How do I lose access to it? What do I need to lose to not be able to get to use it anymore? What if I change device? How can I, what if I've set it up on Windows, but I actually use a Mac at work, or vice versa? So I think complexities like that come in. And again, we've been using passwords for decades. So we're just so ingrained, like the whole thought process around passwords is so ingrained in our society, in how we work. People just know what they are, and they know what they're getting. They read the tin can, so okay, I know what I'm getting with a password. With a passkey, like, who owns this? Is it Apple? Is it Google? Is it Microsoft? Is it Dashlane? Is it? So I think there's this fear of unknown. And we're also moving from most people storing something in their head, which has a certain comfort, even if it's insecure. You cannot store passkeys in your head. They have to live in software. So you're asking people to like kind of give up a bit of agency and rely on some sort of software. And then they have to choose that software. Is it software that comes with their operating system, or are they going to use a third-party piece of software? And what are the pros and cons of that? So there are a lot of questions that people have to answer before they commit to a form of authentication. And I would say the last one is, which has come up over the years, is vendor locking. And I'll talk about that hopefully later on. But people are scared that, if they want to change the product that manages their passkeys, how do they do that? Because now they're stuck.
Yeah,
one of
I'm sorry, let's gather some thoughts from Brian and Aisha, and then I do want us to spend some time now talking about the vendor lock-in concern. So sorry, Brian, go right ahead.
No, that's totally fine. So yeah, I mean, what we see from the end user perspective is very similar to what Rue was saying, but like we also see it feels like friction, right? You've just logged in, and it's like, hey, the next time you come here, would you like to make this simpler? And you're like, I don't know what that means. And if I click that button, I'm gonna spend 15 minutes setting this thing up, or is this like a one click and I'm done? And then what does it really mean when I come back? It's going to be faster. Like, I think just as an industry, like there's not enough information and we haven't made it, simple for them to discover how simple it actually is. And then we haven't also gamified it or blocked things until they do it. Right. So in order to change behavior, you have to either incentivize people, make it fun, do something, give them a reward, or you have to give them pain, right? It's like, well, you can't do that anymore until you set up your passkey. And so we haven't really done that. And honestly, most apps will not do that, right? Because they make money once the user gets in there. It's like, go play the game and buy, things in the game. So the faster they get them into the game, the more money they make. And so we have to reduce that friction while still increasing security. And so there's these two sort of competing ideals in our world that are very hard to convince the user to improve their security via something that's unknown to them. So yeah, that's what we see a lot of when we're trying to get users onboarded with passkeys.
Mm.
And if you're enjoying this, LeadDev has a ton more to offer.
I'm quite fond of the articles.
I feel like LeadDev blogs are my favorite, and it's been really, really useful to kind of create these more meaningful connections as well.
If there's something you're struggling with as an engineering leader, there's a pretty good chance that LeadDev has published something that addresses it.
So make sure you check out leaddev.com.
Aisha, thoughts?
Yeah, so I think from the user side, a lot has been said already in terms of the reluctance. And there are also, even within organizations internally, there could be reluctance into adopting a complexity of adoption of it into applications, or sometimes even maintaining both versions as an option is given to users. So we could see sort of reluctance from that perspective as well, like developer side, app side, or product side, or the business side. Are we really cutting costs? Maybe we can
Yes.
Later on.
That was going to be my question. Have you encountered resistance of from the finance side of this seems like tech debt. This doesn't seem valuable. Help me understand. I think that kind of anticipates the next question I wanted to ask, which is the other side of the reluctance, and it is kind of the selling, right? How do we tailor that message to those different personas? And I'd love to hear more from Brian and Aisha on that. But Rue, do you want to talk more about the vendor lock-in concern?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of advertising here, but so within the FIDO Alliance, there are different groups, and I actually co-chair a group called the Credential Provider Special Interest Group that pulls together Apple, Microsoft, Dashlane, 1Password, Bitwarden, and others. And the last 2 years, we've actually been addressing this concern of vendor lock-in. We created a couple of standards called Credential Exchange Format, Credential Exchange Protocol. You can look them up search them on Google or look them up on the FIDO website. And Apple just had their event last night, or last night in Europe, announcing their new devices. But the the OS 26 version will actually contain an implementation of this standard now. So what that means is, previously, if you want to move your passwords from A to B, you had to like export this plain text CSV file with all your passwords, save it on your desktop. Hopefully it doesn't get lost. It was a mess. The new process will be literally a few clicks. You'll just, you'll be in one product, you'll say, I want to export my data, you'll select your destination product, and all your data will be there. So it was actually a good thing that there was this concern for vendor locking, because it spurred the industry into action. And, we came up with something that I don't think we would have done otherwise, because we're talking about competitors working together to kind of do something for the greater good, as it were. Like, data portability is important for reasons like GDPR and whatnot, but I'd say it's important just for being good citizens of the internet. Like, you shouldn't lock people into your product, especially if it's their credentials. So vendor lock-in, I think, is an immediate concern people have, but I'm hoping over the next few years we'll start to see implementations of this, and it will no longer be a concern, especially for passkeys.
Yeah, definitely. The first two questions that came up when I started sharing this event were vendor lock-in and lost. So, yeah. Can you I don't want you to feel like you're doing an ad or anything. We're here to learn. This is great. Can you tell us just a little bit more about this consortium, this group that you're a part of within the FIDO Alliance?
Yeah, so the FIDO Alliance is a standards body, just like W3C or other standards bodies. Typically, it's composed of working groups that are created by the board, dedicated on specific tasks. But you also have like looser groups that are a lot more, let's say, members only, to put it in that's the best way I can describe it. So we created this members only group, which is just for passkey providers or credential managers or password managers. And it allowed everyone to relax a little bit, because it was a closed group where we all had the same concerns. We had the same, problems. We were figuring things out together. And the great thing is, we all work together as a team, and we're talking about big competitors, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Dashlane, Bitwarden, 1Password, and other companies like that. And this was a process of 2 years. We're on a Zoom call every 2 weeks, and 3 times a year we'd meet up face to face during the FIDO events. And I've never been involved in a process to create an internet standard. And it's very similar to software development. You're not writing code, you're writing specs, you're writing, specifications, you're deciding the words that go into a standard, and you're all like, agreeing or disagreeing, modifying, and then creating PRs. So it's all happening on GitHub. FIDO is a members only organization, so it doesn't happen totally openly, but the standard eventually gets published. So it's a private GitHub repository. And then this process continues. Then you go through sort of like a 90-day IPR period to wait for, before it becomes a proposed standard. And the proposed standard just came along in August. So this stuff happened really quick. Apparently standards don't get developed so quickly. So I was really happy to see that it moved quickly. And I think part of the reason was there were just the right people in the room, and half the problem is just finding the right people to work together. So that was a process. It's all down to the FIDO Alliance bringing these competitors together and creating the environment for them to work together. And that's happening continuously. It's not over. It's still there, and the new problems that will come up with passkeys, these groups will work together to solve them.
That's terrific. That's like one of the most hopeful things I've heard in tech recently. So really impressed. Great work, Ruin team. Awesome. Well, let's move forward and let's talk about the selling. Let's talk about tailoring that message for the different personas. Brian and Aisha, I'd love to hear from you about user behavior and user acceptance. What does this look like in real life, on your real teams, with your real customers? How do you address the sense of security, safety? Take it away, my friends.
Sure, you want to go first? You want me to go?
You can go for it, Brian.
All right, sweet. Cool. So when we talk to developers, for us, it's like super simple to pitch, right? because it's literally like one toggle. You go in and you're like, yep, I want passkeys. And then we just have a whole flow that's built out as part of our authentication and registration flows that allows you to register, and create these passkeys. So that seems like it's a pretty easy sell. However, the crux of that is then they're like, okay, well, then how do I get my users to use it, right? And like, we got to get this user adoption. And that's really where we work a lot with customers to sort of walk them through some strategies to adopt it and get their users to start using it more and more, right? And so because the way that we do our authentication, we'll know all of the things that occurred during a process, so you can like go back and look at those things. And so, passkeys might be one of those, and we'll say like, yeah, they did have a passkey. And so the application can then look at that and then offer the user different options to say like, hey, you don't have a passkey, or you do, like, great, good work for doing that. Here's a reward, or you haven't done it yet, go do it, and then you can unlock this thing. So there are lots of like kind of cool ways to incentivize users to enable passkeys. And then, the other way to do it is just show them a video or show them like a little tutorial of how to do it to get them over that fear of the unknown. And we've seen folks do that as well. It's like, here's a quick 30-second little video that shows you exactly what's going to happen when you click that, let's create a passkey button. And that works well for sort of like more of an older audience, or, folks that are not as tech savvy and want to try all the new things. And so that's kind of some of the methodologies we've seen. But for us, it's really up to the customers. And, our customers, we just say like, hey, use this. It's a great technology. It's going to help protect your users. Just go for it. And we even made it free. So we took it from one of our paid plans and put it in one of our free plans specifically to help push it more with our customers. I'll hand it off to Aisha.
Yeah, as Brian and Rue are literally on the field doing this very thing, I would definitely love to hear more from your side. But when I look at we said there's hesitation and a resistance to adoption, both from user side and sometimes organization sides, and complications. Purely behavior change is what we're looking at as well. Like Rue said, we have been using passwords for decades. So those are the things that I would tackle if I was to sort of go ahead and trying to convince people who are reluctant to adopt it, how we do it. If I look at, given my background in security, if I look at security leadership, bringing everyone into the same table within an organization would be the very first thing. I think there's a massive security sell within adoption of passkeys, right? So we all agree with that. Makes you definitely less vulnerable to phishing attempts, as there is nothing to steal, and it makes applications a lot lighter in terms of its security responsibilities, as well as the product teams as well. So that's where I would, from my side, where I would focus if I was to pitch this, to any organization.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would look at this another way, which is, let me start by saying that there's a UX working group within the FIDO Alliance, and they did a lot of studies, and they found that people don't want to be interrupted to do something else after they've logged in. Like, they've just logged in, they want to do whatever they want to do with that service. They don't need to have to register now something they don't understand. So that's painful. And there are certain flows that work. For example, if the user's recovering their account, they may be interested in setting up something so that it's easier. But this is all kind of moot, because what's been developed, and please remember, like, passkeys aren't done. The standards underneath them, WebAuthn and CTAP, are being evolved all the time. And the latest evolution is something called, the technical term I think is called conditional creation, or automatic passkey creation. So I'm going to try to explain this. So if you have a service that enables this, and the user's using a password manager that supports this, when the user goes to autofill their password, at that moment behind the scenes, a passkey will be created. So the next time the user comes back, they'll actually experience a passkey flow rather than a password flow. So Brian, FusionAuth should definitely be looking into conditional registration because that'll just entirely remove the friction. Now, it's not for every service because some services may have some regulation that requires the user to know they've created a certain credential. But a lot of services, they will just automatically create a passkey. So I wanted to mention that because I know that, the biggest problem right now is how to convince users to create the passkey. But the technology is going to evolve to a point where if the service really supports it and the user's using a password manager that supports it, they'll just get a pass key without realizing it. And some services have already rolled this out.
Yeah, with the working group that's working on the conditional creation or the automatic passkey creation, like have they talked as a group about how this may bring up those same existential worries that we talked about at the beginning by just go ahead and doing it for you and kind of sliding it under the hood? What's been the thought there?
It's a tool, and it's a tool that is given to the relying party, the service, to decide if they wish to deploy. It's optimistic. There's no guarantee that the passkey gets created. It relies on all the stars aligning. So the service needs to support it, the password manager needs to support it, the user needs to have just auto-filled the password. So the conditions are quite specific. But yes, if those conditions are met, then in the background, there'll be a passkey created. The user might get a little toast message saying, boom, passkey created, and they might wonder what's that, and they might click on it and look into it. But the idea is that next time the user arrives, thanks to another technological conditional mediation, just the login field will actually trigger the passkey experience. So if this all works how it's designed, the user shouldn't notice anything different. They'll just be suddenly logged in. Maybe they'll use their, biometrics to when it's asked for, but they shouldn't really notice. I mean, especially if they're using a password manager and it's already auto-filling the password, it's already like magic anyway. Now it's just going to be phishing resistant.
It feels more like an extended session, right? So there's apps that you're logged into for ever. You log in once and then we like to say your tokens last for 5 years. We recommend not doing that, but a lot of people do because it's zero friction. You're just in, you're always logged in. So this is going to feel the same way, but behind the scenes, you're authenticating, which is great because it's the same sort of proof mechanism, which is awesome.
Gotcha. Other thoughts before we move forward?
Nothing else to add.
All right, Brian, I think I want to hand it back to you to talk about the practical side, right? We've got about 10 minutes left in our session. I want to hear from each of you, Brian, Rue, and Aisha. What are some of the common challenges that teams face when introducing passkeys to their apps? What have you seen out in the wild? Aisha, I'd love to hear about a successful implementation, but here is the time for us to close and to share some stories from our own teams and our own lives. So, Brian, you can start.
Sorry, I apologize. I was catching up on the comments. And I was trying to read what we were answering, but what was it was common pitfalls, I think it was the question.
Yep.
Yeah. So
common challenges, common pitfalls.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's less about the actual implementation of it, unless people are building it themselves. Don't recommend doing that, but you can if you want. There's a lot of resources out there. But the other pitfalls are things that we've kind of already just covered, right? It's just we need to get, the applications to embrace it and implement it. And if you're not using an OAuth flow, with something like FusionAuth, it's a little trickier, right? Because then you have to actually implement that, sort of natively in your app. And that's okay. Even FusionAuth and supports that, but also, then the password managers get involved in some of those things as well. So there's some friction there, especially with mobile devices. And some of that friction comes from the fact that the specifications for just the authentication mechanism of mobile devices they're bad, right? So like OAuth just does a really, really horrible job of covering mobile devices because it's web-based. And so then we're doing these like sort of like embedded web views, and like a lot of that's pretty janky. There's a lot of, takeover problems or token stealing issues that people have to contend with. And the UX is just really clunky. And so when you're talking, mobile or even console or just other ways that people are authenticating, it's, the standards aren't like fully baked for all those things and make it simple to just like implement passkeys through one standard flow, which might be like, OAuth, let's say, or GNAP or whatever. So like that's what we see is like the common pitfall. It's like there's so many ways to implement this. There's so many not competing, but like so many different standards, and like half of them are only like partially baked, which make it challenging from the vendor perspective to get those things implemented, right? So that's what we see. But once people do it, it's great. Users love it. Once they figure out that they can log in without a password and they just like click a button and they're in. They're like, people like literally like the wave will happen where like you'll just see all this adoption happen, through your user base once you get it implemented, and it's pretty amazing. So.
Rue, did you have anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I would say, we're waiting on everyone to have updated operating systems, because not every version of Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android supports passkeys natively. And that was a problem in the, let's say, in the early times when you needed to be on, I don't know, Android 14 or iOS 17 or whatnot. With Windows and synced passkeys, you're going to have to be on Windows 11. So I think that's an issue, but over time that will be less and less of an issue. For Dashlane, we kind of solve that because we're a browser extension. We can work on any sort of, for example, Chromium browser. It doesn't matter which version of operating system you're using, it will work. So that's some of the challenges, I think. But if I look at it the other way, and like, what are some of the challenges that we've kind of got rid of? When we're dealing with passwords, it's a guessing game of trying to analyze the page to work out if it's a password or not. So there's like a probabilistic sort of method to analyzing the DOM structure and whatnot, and that can be hit and miss. When you're using passkeys, it's deterministic because it's an API. If you call that API, this is going to happen. And as long as all the things are in place, it's going to work. And I think that just simplifies a lot of code bases, especially for a password manager. So yeah, I think the challenges and the sort of benefits are varying depending on if you're looking at it from sort of a developer of a password manager to an end user. I think the end user friction points, like I say, they're going to diminish as time goes on, partly because people are just going to update their systems, partly also because these standards are going to improve to solve some of the problems that we're facing.
Thank you, Rue. Well, we've got 3 minutes left in our session. We are not going to have time for questions in our live session, but we all are going to head over to Slack afterwards. I'd love to ask Aisha to end us on a positive note of talking a little bit more in summary about the advantages of passkeys and how implementing passkeys help your teams balance security and cost and user experience and identity authorization. So Aisha, tell your story. Let's close this out today.
Yeah, let's summarize the advantages. They're sort of obvious, but not necessarily something that we can overlook, right? So number one, from where I'm standing, security advantages. Passkeys eliminate the weakest link, being the passwords. They help you also eliminate attacks like phishing and credential stealing, etc., and password reuse, any attack that concerns that is involved with passwords. So there's the security advantages. There are cost advantages with hidden password costs that are happening in the background. So that's really another great advantage to highlight. And obviously the user experience advantages, right? So from user perspective, they make it dramatically simpler for users to use whatever is the application, whether it is unlocking your phone, passkey to a device, to an AWS account, or a web application or a mobile application. So the balancing of these three advantages, along with some of the challenges and all the great things happening in the industry, is where I would like to stop. I was going to talk about a little bit, 2 examples of successful implementation. What I can do is talk about one, and then I can give the links in the Slack channel. So one was that we at Amazon Web Services, for example, introduced Passkeys as a way to use multi-factor authentication. There is a push towards ensuring that our customers are taking that approach to security securing AWS accounts. That's one implementation I can send a blog post about. Another one I will discuss in the Slack channel.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for joining us with our panelists. Let's head over to Slack to continue the conversation. Have a great day.